Hello and welcome back to this event. I am going to be sharing today with you 3 important topics, all relating to silencing the inner critic and cultivating our self-compassion. Together today, we're going to explore the inner critic. What is it? Where is it? Where did it come from? Why does it even exist? We're going to talk about how to heal it. And we're going to talk about self-compassion. What is it and why is it so powerful? And how do we cultivate it? Now, for so many of us, the inner critic has run the show for years. We all know that voice. It's the one that doubts, that criticizes, that seems absolutely impossible to please. And just the fact that you are here tells me that you have felt the sting of this critic. Now, I'm not sure what your relationship is with yours, but when I first started doing this work a decade ago, I oscillated between either having head-to-heads with my inner critic or trying to ignore it altogether, pretending like it wasn't there. But this critic affects us deeply. It alters what we do or keeps us from doing the things that we most desire. With this relentless little Miss Judgy or Mr. Judgy overlooking everything that we do, it is so hard to not feel constantly like we're just not good enough. So 10 years ago, I was feeling completely stuck in the cycle I just described until something happened that literally transformed my relationship with my inner critic. And actually, it would be no exaggeration to say that it really changed my life. So I'm going to take you back to being at a conference in Belgium. It was hosted by His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. I had signed up for a session led by Dr. Dick Schwartz, the creator of the internal family systems. And frankly, I'd never heard of him. I'd never heard of this system. I was feeling, fair to say, skeptical, but curious. Now, he began by asking us to identify a part of ourselves that was keeping us stuck. I was able to very quickly identify my inner critic. And basically, after a series of guided questions, I found myself in a room full of people crying my eyes out. And surprisingly, thanking my inner critic. That day, I embraced it as a friend, and to my amazement, my inner critic disappeared for years. So what magic did he use? What was that about? Let's go into that now. So Dr. Dick Schwartz, through his work as a family therapist, identified that just like we have an external family, we have an internal family of parts within us. And that these parts were often developed as a protective response to a wound or a trauma. And so these parts, whether they are a joker or the perfectionist or the inner critic, as we're talking about today, were often formed in childhood. So for example, if you once or repeatedly experienced humiliation, and we all know the pain of humiliation runs deep, then you might develop, or we might develop, an inner critic that might make us keeps us from making mistakes, right? Its job becomes to hold us to such high standards that we will never again experience that kind of humiliation again. And so actually our inner critic is often playing a protective part. In fact, almost always is protecting us from being too vulnerable. And in my instance, when I identified it and spoke with it that time, it was trying to stop me from burning out. And so the first shift I'm inviting you today, the first invitation really is to really see your inner critic not as an enemy, but as a well-intentioned protector. Imagine it as a scared friend trying its best, although clumsy and may not always be effective. So inviting you to just take a moment now, eyes open or closed, whatever feels better for you, and just take a breath in and a breath out. And maybe just recall a recent time when your inner critic spoke up. What did he or she, it say? And can you identify any part of that criticism as an attempt to protect you? Now, I'm going to guide you deeper into this, because now that we understand that the inner critic is a protector, let's explore how we actually heal this part. Now, the role of a protector is to shield us from pain, right? The role of all of those parts that Dick Schwartz in the internal family system calls the managers, all their job is to defend us against revisiting old wounds, right? Their job is to stop that original wound, that trauma from being poked. And in IFS, Dr. Schwartz talks about how the real healing comes from connecting with and understanding this part, not from silencing it. And so in effect, it is literally to do the opposite of what most of us do. It's about creating a relationship with it, listening to it with curiosity rather than fighting it or ignoring it. It is this embracing of all our parts, in realizing there is no bad parts, even the uncomfortable ones. It is this embracing that leads to a radical sense of inner safety. That self-acceptance, that inner safety is the root of all true healing. Now, to support you in this, I'm going to be sharing with you a 10-minute practice that you can use to connect with your inner critic or any other part that you wish to connect with and understand better. Now, when I say connect, I don't mean you're going to marry this part. This part doesn't, I'm not saying you're going to be chatting to it all day long. But what I am saying is that instead of ignoring it or fighting with it, you're going to connect with it. And I would really love to hear from you after you try this meditation, because I am pretty sure it's going to blow your mind away and you're going to find it really insightful. So I'd love to hear from you about what insights you discover. But essentially how it's going to go in the meditation, as well as the invitation for you from now on whenever your inner critic comes up, is that you first of all recognize, right? You can recognize, you can bring awareness, you can name it. Oh, what I do is I like to say, oh, there you are. As soon as I recognize my inner critic, I name it. Oh, hello. There you are. Then I quickly go to, how do I feel towards this part? Because the self, the higher self, my higher me, my soulful me, my wise warrior me, knows that this part is a protective part and therefore can feel neutral or curious or compassionate towards it. But if I feel anything other than that, then I know that it's a part judging that part. And I can just ask it to step away. And essentially what you want to then do with this inner critic is connect. Literally as if you've got a person who just walked into the room. When I identify it and I'm like, oh, there you are. I'll get into a neutral place with it. And then I'll be like, what's going on? I'll ask it. What's happening? Why are you here? What have you got to say to me? Right? And so this is about deeply listening. To hear something, to know and see what shifts we might notice, what insights you might get. At that point, whatever it tells you, whatever it says, then the invitation is just to reassure it. You've got this. I'm going to share with you the practice, like I said, and it's going to guide you through that step by step. For our final part, I want us to dive deep into self-compassion, because this is the pillar of the fourth transformation. This is all about moving from self-criticism and shame towards a nurturing, compassionate relationship with ourselves. I literally found that developing my self-compassion was the biggest catalyst that enabled me to recover from burnout and trauma. It was the biggest catalyst that enabled me to return to my wholeness, to my vitality, to my resilience. So what is self-compassion? I'm going to invite you to take a moment to think, what does that mean for you? Well, Dr. Kristen Neff, one of the leading researchers in their field, says that self-compassion has 3 essential elements. Self-kindness instead of judgment. Identifying with our common humanity, which resolves our sense of isolation. And mindfulness instead of over-identifying with any negative emotion. And so for me, I literally think of it as treating ourselves with the same love, with the same kindness, and with the same understanding that I would offer my best friend. Right? It's that ability to acknowledge our own suffering and respond with gentleness instead of with criticism, judgment, or avoidance. So what does compassion look and sound like? Well, it can be a shift in your language as well as a shift in your mindset. It's really, how do you meet yourself in every moment, especially the difficult moments? So for instance, if you imagine you've made a mistake at work, your inner critic might leap up and be like, I can't believe you just did that. You are so careless. You are so useless. Right? Whereas a self-compassionate response might be more like, mine, this is what mine sounds like anyway. You're going to have to identify what yours are. Mine would be like, oh, oops. Right. Well, that was a boo-boo. But guess what? We all muck up. Take a breath. Take a breath and learn from this. And it might sound so simple, and it is. Yeah, I know that it is so difficult for so many of us because it is not how we have grown. It's not how society is around us even, right? We have not learned to become our own friends and allies. We have learned to become our own harshest judges. And so what's beautiful is that this development of self-compassion has enabled me in a most challenging moment to be present with my own pain. It has meant that I no longer saw myself as broken, needing to be fixed. It meant that I could be with my pain, I could be with my own suffering, and it also meant that I could then be with someone else in their pain. It really expanded my unconditional kindness and love towards myself and therefore towards others. Now, in terms of a practical tool, because I know that we're all like, yeah, so that's great, be nice to myself, but how am I going to do that in practice? We're going to talk in a minute about just more back to daily life, but I love the RAIN practice that Tara Brach has developed. And in that, RAIN is an acronym, and it's sort of a tool for cultivating compassion. And so it starts with the R of RAIN, so that's to recognize. So you start by recognizing, bringing that awareness that I was talking about a moment ago, about how you're experiencing self-criticism in that moment. You recognize and acknowledge, like, this is hard. And it's okay to feel this way. The A is to allow. It's to allow you to feel whatever comes up instead of resisting it, which is what we often do, right? Resisting it. So instead of that, we give ourselves permission to fully experience our emotion, our shame, our frustration, our sadness. So we allow. And then you go to the I of RAIN, which is investigate. And that's where we gently explore with curiosity and non-judgmentality. Like, what's the underlying need here? Like, what needs to be understood, heard, maybe even seen or forgiven. And finally, there's the N of rain, nurture. And that's really the heart of self-compassion. And that's the biggest thing that I would say has been a game changer for me, is that learning to nurture. N is for nurture. Nurturing yourself by responding in a kind and supportive way. I love to put a hand on my heart, sometimes a heart on my hand and a heart on my wound. And it's literally this way of just holding myself in that moment of challenge. And I'll often say, like, it's okay. Sometimes I might say, what do you need right now? And it's such a beautiful sort of opportunity to connect to a need that we might have. And that need might just be like, I need a hug. I'll go and find someone to give me a hug. Or it might even be like, I need a glass of water or chocolate occasionally. Wink, wink, / not so occasionally. But that RAIN acronym, I'm going to invite you to practice. And like with everything that I'm teaching, it's not a one and done. It is not an event. It is a process that I'm going to invite you to consistently practice. So for me in my own life, what self-compassion looked for me in practice was that it's helped me to develop unshakable self-care. It also meant that I have started to respect my capacity with how I work, and I no longer schedule back-to-back meetings. I have started to acknowledge myself. I acknowledge myself for my work. I acknowledge myself for my accomplishments. And that has all meant that it has made me so much less externally dependent on others for any validation. Because I'm now validating myself, recognizing myself, right? Backing myself. Instead of just being my critic, I'm actually being my own cheerleader, my own supporter, my own ally. And I want to just come back to that point about self-care, because this is the thing that I often find with so many of my clients. They'll come to me and they say, I don't understand. I'm doing the yoga, I'm doing the meditation, I'm going for the massage, but I still don't feel nurtured. I still don't feel energized. And 9 times out of 10, when I will investigate that with them, it will be because all that self-care is going into an internal toxic environment of self-care, of self-loathing, of self-judgment. It's literally like you're trying to sow seed in the most unfertile ground. I can assure you that there is no amount of self-care activities, of tools or practices you can do that will give you the true self-care that you need, the true nourishment you need, until it comes from a place of true care for yourself, i.e. from a place of self-love and compassion. Now, I'm going to invite us to close this section with a brief exercise. Invite you to take a deep breath. Maybe place one hand on your heart. And I want you to remember a recent situation where maybe your inner critic was particularly loud. Maybe it was that instance you remembered a few moments ago. And maybe you can say something kind to it, like you would a friend who is struggling. Maybe you'll say, I know this is difficult. I know you're doing your best, and I'm so proud of you. Or maybe you just simply say, I'm here and I'm listening. Now, those of you who were there for the other lectures will know that I shared with you my favorite self-compassion practice, which is the I love you, I'm listening. I will also link it here so for you to try that if you haven't tried it. And really, it's just a reminder that self-compassion is not a one-time practice. I think once you identify that this is an area of growth for you, an area of healing for you, then I'm going to invite you to truly commit to consistently showing up for yourself with the kindness that you deserve. So I'm going to wrap up with why bother? Like, why bother? What are the benefits of cultivating self-compassion? Well, we ain't got all day, but I wanted to share with you that it has been shown by so many studies that self-compassionate individuals experience a greater sense of emotional resilience, lower levels of anxiety, lower levels of depression, and an overall improved sense of well-being. So we know that when we practice self-compassion, we activate our parasympathetic nervous system. That is our system of rest and digest. It helps us to reduce our stress levels and to promote a sense of calm. So this basically helps us to develop stronger emotional regulation and a healthier response to our challenges, and it makes us more adaptable, more resourceful in difficult situations. And so for those of us leaders, cultivating self-compassion is literally, I think, one of the highest priorities of any leader, because it helps us to develop our compassion and our presence with others. And here's the thing, without feeling overwhelmed. And I think one of the most powerful things about self-compassion is actually, unlike what most people think that if I'm kind and compassionate to myself, I'm going to let myself off the hook. Wrong. Research has shown it's exactly the opposite. It increases our capacity for self-motivation. It increases our capacity for personal growth. It actually allows us to pursue our intentions and our goals with so much more confidence rather than with like a dreaded sense of fear or of failure. So, to recap, today we covered 3 key areas. We talked about recognizing our inner critic as a protector. We talked about creating a radical sense of inner safety by embracing our parts. And we talked about developing our self-compassion. And so, just before we go, I want to invite you to take a moment. What one insight from today can you carry into your week? What one small commitment can you make to be more self-compassionate to yourself in your daily life? Is it about being kinder to how you speak to yourself? Is it about acknowledging your efforts? Or maybe it's when you recognize your inner critic and you go to meet it. Connect with it, embrace it with gentleness, with curiosity. I know that this journey of self-compassion really is a lifelong journey. And I know that this is going to help you to create such a profound foundation for transformation. Thank you for showing up for yourself today in this powerful way. And I really look forward to seeing you at the next session. Remember, it is next Thursday, same time at 2:00 Central European time, 1:00 British GMT. And I really look forward to seeing you next time. And just remember, you're exactly where you need to be kind to yourself. So much love. Thank you. Hello and welcome to this LinkedIn audio event. This is a sound check. Testing, 1, 2, 3.